The Roman legions held on as long as they could turn and present a front to the enemy who now surrounded them. But the constant attrition of the outer ranks meant that the survivors gradually closed in on one another, and in the end they all died where they stood. Among the dead were Attilius and Servilius, the previous year's consuls, men who had demonstrated their courage in the battle and improved themselves true Romans, while the infantry engagement was turning into a massacre. The Numidians were following the fleeing cavalrymen, most of whom were either killed or unseated. Among the few who escaped to Venusia was the Roman consul Varro, a man of no redeeming qualities who did his country great disservice as consul. This was the course and the outcome of the Battle of Cannae, fought between the Romans and the Carthaginians. It was a battle in which both the winners and losers displayed great courage. The facts themselves demonstrate this. Of the 6,000 Roman cavalry, only 70 escaped with Varro to Venusia, and about 300 of the allied cavalry sought refuge in various places here and there. Of the infantry, about 10,000 were captured fighting off the battlefield, however, and only perhaps 3,000 escaped from the battle and found refuge in nearby towns. All the rest, about 70,000 men, died bravely. Not for the first time, it was the cavalry numbers that contributed the most towards the Carthaginian victory. The battle taught later generations that in warfare it is better to have half as many infantry as the enemy and overwhelming cavalry superiority than to have exactly the same numbers as the enemy in all respects. The losses on Hannibal's side were in round numbers: 4,000 Celts, 1,500 Iberians and Libyans, and 200 cavalrymen. The reason why the Romans who were taken prisoner were off the battlefield was that Aemilius had left 10,000 Romans in his own camp. Their job was to rush over to Hannibal's camp during the battle, if he had fielded all his men and left the camp untended, and capture the enemy's baggage. On the other hand, if he took precautions and left an adequate garrison, the Romans would have fewer men to fight in the decisive battle. Anyway, they came to be captured as follows. As the battle started, the Romans carried out their orders, and they assaulted the enemy camp, in which Hannibal had left an adequate garrison, and attacked those who had been left there. At first the Carthaginian garrison held out, but soon they found themselves in trouble. By then, however, the battle had been decided in Hannibal's favor in every other part of the field. He came to the assistance of the beleaguered garrison, routed the Romans, and pinned them inside their own camp. 2,000 of them were killed, and all the rest were captured alive. Likewise, the Numidians assaulted the strongholds in the countryside where the Romans had taken refuge, and brought in about 2,000 of the cavalrymen who had turned in flight. The result of the battle meant that the war reached exactly the critical point that both sides had expected. Their achievement brought the Carthaginians the immediate mastery of almost all the rest of the coastline. Tarentum surrendered right away, and some Campanian towns approached Hannibal, and all the other cities inclined from then on toward the Carthaginian side. The Carthaginians even found themselves in a position to anticipate capturing Rome itself in short order. And for the Romans, the defeat meant that they immediately gave up any hope of retaining supremacy in Italy, and brought them to the point where they were at serious risk of losing their lives and the very soil of their homeland, and where they fearfully expected to do so, since they anticipated Hannibal's arrival at any moment. It seemed in fact as though fortune were using events to dole out an extra portion of bad luck and pile on the agony, because a few days later, with the city already gripped by fear, the general they had sent to Gaul was ambushed by the Celts, and he and his army were annihilated. Nevertheless, the Senate continued to do their best. They tried to alleviate the general gloom. They secured the city, and they did not let fear get the better of them as they debated the crisis. And subsequent events showed that they were right. For although at that point the Romans had undoubtedly been defeated, and although their military supremacy had passed into other hands, the peculiar virtues of their constitution and their sound deliberation not only enabled them to regain dominion over Italy and to beat the Carthaginians, but within a few years they had made themselves masters of the entire known world.